never thought I'd be the kind of person to fear my own home. I moved into my new place in Clearwater just a few weeks ago. A quiet neighborhood, friendly neighbors, nothing out of the ordinary. It wasn't a big house, just a modest one-story, with an attic I never planned on using. The previous owner left it mostly empty, except for a few discarded pieces of furniture. I figured I'd deal with it later. That was before the noises started. It was a Thursday evening, a little after 8 p.m. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, and threw together a quick dinner, just some grilled chicken and frozen corn. As I stood at the sink draining the water from the corn, I heard it. A scraping sound. It was faint but distinct, coming from inside the walls. At first I told myself it was just the house settling. Old wood shifts, expands, contracts. I'd lived in places with bad piping before. This was nothing. But then it happened again. This time it wasn't just a scrape. It was a slow, deliberate drag, like something sharp being pulled across a wooden surface. My hand stiffened around the colander. My first thought was mice, or maybe even a raccoon in the attic. Annoying, but not terrifying. I turned off the stove and walked toward the hallway, listening. Silence. Still, I wasn't about to let my imagination get the best of me. I forced myself to relax, grabbed my plate, and sat in front of the TV. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. I was starting to forget about the noise, sinking into some Netflix documentary when another scraping sound came. Louder this time, and worse, it sounded closer. I muted the TV. The sound came again right above me. I looked up, heart pounding. The attic. I grabbed my phone and walked to the hallway, standing directly under the attic hatch. It was one of those old pull-down ones, with a rope hanging from the ceiling. I didn't like the idea of climbing up there at night, but I also didn't want to spend the whole evening wondering. I reached for the cord, hesitating for just a second before yanking it down. The wooden steps creaked as they unfolded. A gust of stale air rushed down, carrying with it the scent of dust and something faintly rotten. I climbed up slowly, phone flashlight in hand. The attic was nearly empty, except for an old wooden dresser and a few scattered pieces of furniture covered with white sheets. I swept the light around, looking for any sign of an animal. Nothing. Then my flashlight caught something near the far wall footprints. They weren't fresh, but they were there. Dark, smudged outlines of shoes in the dust. My stomach twisted. Had the previous owner been up here recently? Or was it someone else? I stepped closer, my breath coming out uneven. That's when I saw them. The scratches on the wooden beams. They weren't random. They were deep, carved deliberately, crisscrossing each other in strange patterns. Some of them looked like tally marks. I suddenly felt exposed, standing there in that empty attic as if something was watching me from the shadows. A crash from below made me nearly drop my phone. I whipped around, heart in my throat. It had come from the kitchen. I raced down the attic ladder, shoving it closed behind me. My eyes darted around the living room. Nothing looked out of place. Then I saw it. The back door was unlocked. I knew. I had locked it earlier. My hands felt numb as I turned the deadbolt again. I wanted to believe I had just forgotten, that I was being paranoid, but deep down I knew better. I barely slept that night. The next evening I tried to shake it off. I double-checked all the locks, turned on every light, and convinced myself I was safe. Just my mind playing tricks on me. But at exactly 11:43 p.m., I woke up to the sound of movement above me. I stopped breathing. It wasn't the scraping noise this time, it was shuffling. Slow, careful footsteps. I lay there, rigid, listening. It moved from one side of the attic to the other, then stopped. Then, the worst part, the attic hatch creaked. I bolted upright, staring at my bedroom ceiling. The hatch didn't open completely. It just shifted slightly, as if someone was testing it. I reached for my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's someone in my attic. My voice was barely a whisper. The dispatcher stayed on the line as I crept into the hallway, keeping my eyes on the ceiling. My front door was only a few steps away. I could run. Then a sound stopped me cold, a slow exhale. Not mine. It came from right above me. I nearly dropped the phone. My mind went blank with pure animalistic terror. That was not an animal. That was not the house settling. That was a person. "Sir," the dispatcher's voice yanked me back. I'm leaving the house," I stammered, fumbling with the lock. I didn't even put on shoes. I just ran outside into the freezing night air. The police arrived 5 minutes later. They searched the entire house, then pulled down the attic hatch. There was no one up there, but they found something else. In the far corner, near the old dresser, there was a makeshift sleeping area, a flattened-out blanket, a few crumpled food wrappers, and worst of all, a notebook. Inside were pages and pages of handwritten notes about me. What time I got home, what I ate for dinner, what shows I watched, what time I went to bed. Some of the entries went back weeks. The police suspected it was a homeless squatter, someone who had slipped in before I moved in and stayed hidden. But that didn't explain everything. It didn't explain why the footprints in the dust only appeared after I first heard the noise. It didn't explain the scratches in the wood or why some of them formed my name. It didn't explain the breath I heard above me that night. I moved out 2 days later. I don't know who or what was in that attic, and I don't want to know. I never wanted to move. I had grown up in a comfortable neighborhood surrounded by familiar faces and a sense of security. But after my dad got a new job, my parents decided we needed a fresh start. That's how we ended up in an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of a town I had never heard of. The place was nothing like our old home. It was small, surrounded by a dense forest, and had this eerie silence that made my skin crawl. The floors creaked with every step, and the air inside always felt stale, no matter how many windows we opened. But the worst part? I had never felt more alone. We had just lost Toby, our family dog. He had been with me since I was little, my constant companion. His absence hit me harder than I expected. At night, I would find myself reaching for him, only to remember he was gone. My parents, always busy with work, left me home alone often. And though I wasn't afraid of the dark, I quickly realized something about this house made the darkness feel different. It started small. The first few nights were uneventful, just me adjusting to the empty halls and the unsettling quiet. Then one evening, after spending hours in my room, I walked out and noticed a door at the end of the hallway was slightly open. I stopped in my tracks. I knew for a fact that I had closed it earlier. I had made a habit of shutting all the doors. In the hallway, I didn't like how they gaped open into dark, empty rooms. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the wind had pushed it open. Maybe I hadn't shut it all the way. But as I reached out to close it, something strange caught my eye. The dust on the floor. There was a trail of footprints leading into the room. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The prints were light, almost as if someone had been walking barefoot. They disappeared just inside the doorway, but there were no footprints leading out. I stood there for a long time, staring into the darkness beyond the open door. My heart pounded in my ears. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I had stepped there earlier and didn't remember. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Still, I shut the door, hard, and locked it. That night, I barely slept. The dreams started after that. At first, they were vague, just flashes of shadowy figures standing in my room. Then they became more vivid. In one dream, I saw Toby, my dog. He was in the corner of my bedroom, staring at something near my closet. His ears were pinned back, his teeth bared in a low growl. I called his name, but he wouldn't look at me. I woke up drenched in sweat. The feeling of being watched didn't fade after I woke. It only grew stronger. The next day, I decided to test something. I placed a small piece of paper just inside my bedroom door and another at the entrance of the hallway. If someone or something moved through them, I'd know. Then, at around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. I lay frozen in bed, listening as the steps moved down the hallway. My chest tightened. The footsteps weren't rushed. They weren't panicked. They were calm, controlled, as if whoever, or whatever, it was knew exactly where it was going. And then, creak. The sound came from inside my room. I swallowed hard. My body refused to move. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I forced myself to turn my head slightly toward the door. It was open, the paper I had placed at the entrance. Gone. Something had come in. Something was still here. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning I searched my room. There was no sign of anyone being inside, but the unsettling presence hadn't left. I could feel it lurking just beyond my vision. I needed to be sure. So, that night, I stayed awake. I gripped the largest kitchen knife I could find and waited, in the dark. Hours passed. Then, tap, tap, tap. I held my breath. The sound was faint, like someone pressing their fingers against the wall. Then came the footsteps. This time, they didn't stop at the hallway. They came straight to my room. I tensed. My fingers tightened around the knife. The air was so still I could hear my own heartbeat. Then, creak. My closet door moved. It was only an inch. A barely noticeable shift. But I saw it. Something was inside. I had to act. With every ounce of courage I had, I shot up from the bed and flung the closet door open. Empty. I stood there panting. My pulse thundered in my ears. But then, something made my stomach drop. The dust. There were footprints inside the closet, but no footprints leading out. I ran. I didn't care about making noise. I didn't care about looking back. I sprinted out of my room, down the hallway, and straight out the front door. The cold air hit my face, but I barely felt it. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed my parents. They came home immediately. The police arrived soon after. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No signs of an intruder. But the dust told a different story. There were footprints, small light prints that led into my room, and once again none that led out. I never slept in that house again. Even after we moved, the feeling of being watched never fully left me. I stopped telling myself it was my imagination, because deep down, I knew something had been in that house with me. And some nights, when the world is silent and the shadows stretch just right, I swear I can hear the soft creak of a door opening. I've lived in Willow Creek for almost a year now. It's a quiet, uneventful neighborhood where people wave at each other in passing but don't really know each other. That's why I liked it. It felt safe. That illusion shattered the night. I learned I had never truly been alone. It started with a Facebook message. I was curled up on my couch, a horror movie playing in the background while I mindlessly scrolled on my phone. I wasn't even paying attention to the film. It was just noise to keep the silence of my little rental house at bay. I must have dozed off because the sharp chime of a new notification jolted me awake. Groggy, I reached for my phone. A message from someone I didn't recognize. Daniel Grant. Hey Emily, watching something scary? I frowned, my heart giving a tiny, inexplicable jolt. Who the hell was Daniel Grant? I tapped on his profile. His face was unfamiliar, but he was friends with a coworker, so I must have accepted his request at some point. I typed back, yeah. Who is this? Almost immediately, the typing bubbles appeared. He said, I like how you always fall asleep during movies. Cold prickle ran down my spine. My eyes flicked toward the darkened window beside the TV. Was he outside? I swallowed hard, trying to keep calm. It had to be a coincidence. Maybe I had mentioned that habit online somewhere. Maybe he was guessing. I replied, That's weird, how do you know that? Another response, don't get up, just keep watching. I'll be inside soon. I dropped my phone. Inside? My heart was thudding against my ribs. The room suddenly felt smaller, darker, suffocating. I forced myself to move. The doors, I needed to check the doors. I darted to the front door, twisting the deadbolt. Locked. Then I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A chair sliding across the floor. But not from the living room, not from outside. From my kitchen. Someone was already inside. My stomach turned to ice. I backed away, one shaky step at a time. My bedroom. I needed to get to my bedroom. Lock the door. Call the police. But then, creak. A door. Not mine. A door inside my house. The hallway closet. The realization almost sent me to my knees. He wasn't outside. He wasn't breaking in. He had been here the whole time. My hands trembled as I dialed 911. The dispatcher picked up, but I barely heard her over. The roaring in my ears. "There's someone in my house," I whispered, my voice breaking. A heavy silence stretched behind me. Then, a soft knock on my bedroom door. I slapped a hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. The dispatcher was asking me something, but I couldn't respond because knock, then another, and then a whisper. Right outside my door. "Emily, I've been here before." I choked on a sob, pressing my back against the opposite wall. "Please hurry." I managed to whisper into the phone. The dispatcher's voice was urgent. "Stay where you are. Officers are 2 minutes out." 2 minutes. 2 minutes felt like a lifetime. Bang. The door shook as he slammed his weight against it. "Emily," he cooed. "You locked the basement door this time. That's cute." My throat closed. This time, he had been inside before. Red and blue lights cut through the darkness outside. The police, pounding on the front door. "Police! Open up!" Daniel stopped. For one breathless second, all I could hear was the muffled dispatcher still on the line. Then, a scramble of footsteps. He was running. Not toward the front door, toward the basement. The officers burst into the house. "Miss Carter!" I nearly collapsed as I yanked open my door, pointing frantically toward the stairs. He's down there." The 2 officers drew their guns and rushed after him. I stood frozen, hands gripping my phone so tightly I thought it would break. Then, a struggle, a scream, a sickening thud. Then silence. They caught him. They pulled Daniel Grant from my basement, kicking, snarling, eyes wild. I stood shaking as they hauled him outside, but then one of the officers reappeared, face grim. "Miss Carter," he said, voice low. "We need to show you something." I followed them down the basement stairs. It was worse than I imagined. In the farthest corner, behind the exposed insulation, a hole, a crawl space. Inside, a mattress, empty food containers, a pile of clothes, and photos. Dozens and dozens of photos. Of me. Sleeping, showering, eating, watching TV. He had been here for weeks, maybe months. Living in my walls. I didn't sleep for days. The police said Daniel had rented the house before me. That's how he got in. He still had a key, but that didn't explain everything, because that night, after they took him away, I finally opened his last message, the one I hadn't read yet. It said, "See you soon." I deleted my Facebook. I changed my locks. I moved. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my new apartment, I still feel it, that heavy, unseen gaze. And I wonder, what if he wasn't the only one?